The term biodiversity refers to the totality of genes, species and ecosystem of a region. So what is species diversity then? Variety of different species in a given area is called species diversity. Hello dear students, welcome back to a very new chapter called Biodiversity and Conservation. Myself B. Shobharani from the Department of Biology, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru. I think all of you know that how beautiful our biodiversity is. Our planet Earth consists of an enormous variety of living organisms or enormous biodiversity. Earth has around 20,000 species of ants, 3 lakh species of beetles, 28,000 species of fishes, and 20,000 species of orchids approximately. So with this estimation, we'll get to know how big our biodiversity is and how beautiful our planet Earth is with this beautiful variety of plants and animals existing on this beautiful planet Earth or biosphere. So in today's session, session 1 of this interesting chapter called Biodiversity and Conservation, we are going to discuss about what is biodiversity, what are the levels of biodiversity, and how do we conserve and preserve this beautiful biodiversity. So what is biodiversity then? How do we define the word called biodiversity? The term biodiversity refers to the totality of genes or species and ecosystem of a region. So you can define in many ways. One definition of biodiversity is the term biodiversity refers to the totality of genes, species and ecosystems of a region. Imagine in this beautiful picture how beautiful it is to see this deer moving around in the forest. So imagine this is the beauty of our planet Earth. Imagine if plants and animals were not existing on this planet Earth, I think it would not have been such beautiful like how it is in the present. And it is our bound duty to preserve and conserve this great biodiversity. So how do we define the word called biodiversity? The term biodiversity refers to the totality of genes or species and ecosystem of a region. Or you can define like this. Biodiversity can be defined as the sum total of all kinds of life forms of the biosphere. Life forms of the biosphere. Life forms means what? The living forms. The living forms. So you can define either like that. The term biodiversity refers to the totality of genes, species and ecosystem of a region, or biodiversity can be defined as the sum total of all kinds of life forms of the biosphere, or biodiversity is the sum total of species richness. Sum total of species richness. See how beautifully the word biodiversity is defined. And the word biodiversity was coined by Walter G. Rosen in 1985. That is Walter G. Rosen. Later, it was popularized by Edward Wilson. So the term biodiversity was coined by Walter G. Rosen in the year 1985, and later it was popularized by Edward Wilson. So let us once again define what is biodiversity. The term biodiversity refers to the totality of genes, species and ecosystem of a region, or biodiversity can be defined as the sum total of all kinds of life forms of the biosphere, or biodiversity is the sum total of species richness. The word biodiversity was coined by Walter G. Rosen in 1985. Later, it was popularized by a scientist by name Edward Wilson. Now let us understand or study the different levels of biodiversity. There are 3 different levels of biodiversity. So 3 different levels of biodiversity. So what are the 3 levels? 1, 2 and 3. One is called the genetic level. Second one is called the species level of biodiversity. And third one is called ecosystem, or it can also be called as habitat level. So there are 3 levels of biodiversity. What are the 3 levels? First one is called genetic level of biodiversity. Then second one is called species level of biodiversity. And the third one is called ecosystem or habitat level of biodiversity. Now let us study one by one as to what is genetic level of biodiversity, what is species level of biodiversity, and ecosystem or habitat level of biodiversity. Moving on to the genetic diversity. Here you can see the variety of food grains. Here you can see the beautiful picture of the variety of food grains. So all this is because of the genetic level. So what is genetic diversity? Here you can see the beautiful picture of the food grains here, right? So what is genetic diversity? The genetic variability and variety of alleles, that is the genetic variability and variety of alleles and genotypes found within species is called genetic diversity. Single species might show high diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range. I think all of us know, every day we have rice as a staple food, but don't you come across a variety of rice? You will come across a variety of rice. So what is that variety of rice then? It is due to this genetic diversity. So we have around 50,000 different strains of rice. Imagine, maybe we are very familiar with maybe to the maximum amount 10 varieties of rice, but there are around 50,000 different strains of rice, and it is because of the genetic variability and variation. So the genetic variability and variety of alleles and genotypes found within species is called genetic diversity. Single species, like for example, we have come across in many example like medicinal plant called Rolfia vomitoria of Himalayan range produces active chemical rasparin, shows genetic variety. So even a single species might show high diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range. Now let us understand as to what is this genetic diversity with suitable examples. I think all of us know one medicinal plant called Rolfia vomitoria of Himalayan. I think most of the medicinal plants, we find them in the Himalayan range. They produce active chemical called rasparin, which shows variety of genetic variation. And India, as we know, it has more than 50,000 strains, different varieties of rice, and 1,000 varieties of mango. Maybe we are familiar with 5 to 6 varieties of mango, I think, because we eat those many type of mangoes, which is very commonly available to us. But imagine there are around 1,000 varieties of mango. As you know, mango is called the king of fruits. Who does not like mangoes? Then in human beings also we come across different races. It is all because of the genetic variability. Maybe like we come across different races like in the Africans, Mongoloids and Caucasian races. So even in human beings we have different races. Like we have the African race, Mongoloid race, then the Caucasian race. So that is also due to genetic variability. Then like for example, you come across in the Indian ox, whereas there are several breeds like we have Hallikar, Sindhi, Amrit Mahal, etc., which are rare or bred for various purposes, maybe for the milch purpose, that is for milch breed, or maybe for the draught breed. So all these are the classical examples for genetic diversity. I repeat, what is genetic? There are 3 levels of biodiversity. One is called the genetic level of biodiversity. Second one is called the species level of biodiversity. Third one is called the ecosystem or habitat level of biodiversity. So moving on to the first one called genetic diversity. The genetic variability found within a species is called genetic diversity, and even single species might show high diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range. For example, like the medicinal plant Rolfia omitoria, which is found in the Himalayan range, produces a very active chemicals a substance called a medicinal substance called reserpine, which shows genetic variation. So as we know, even rice has different varieties or different strains, and in India alone we find around 50,000 different strains of rice or varieties of rice and 1,000 varieties of mango. And even in human beings also we come across different races, like the different races will have different looks, different behavior, right, different color. All those is because of the different genetic variation. So in human beings there are races like the Africans, Mongoloid race and Caucasian race. And even in Indian ox we come across there are several breeds like Hallikar, Sindhi and Amrit Mahal. Moving on to the species diversity. Here you can see the beautiful picture of frogs. So there are different varieties of frogs here. You can see this is called one variety, this is one variety, and this is one variety. Here you can see the different species. If you go to the Western Ghats alone have a different species of frog. So that means there is species diversity. So what is species diversity then? Variety of different species in a given area is called species diversity. Just now I told, in Western Ghats alone has a different species of frog. So variety of different species in a given area is called species diversity. For example, like different species of a single animal like frog, which is found in Western Ghats. Then we're moving on to the ecological diversity. So variety of ecosystems. I think all of us know there are different types of habitats. Like we have this different types of ecosystems. Like we have the desert ecosystem, rainforest, wetlands, alpine meadows. All those are different habitats. So it is based on the geographical area, distribution of different species of animals and plants in different geographical area, which constitutes the ecosystem or the habitat level of biodiversity. So ecological diversity can also be called as ecosystem level of biodiversity or habitat level of biodiversity. So variety of ecosystem or habitats present in a geographical area is called ecological diversity. It can also be called as what? Ecosystem or habitat level of biodiversity. Habitat level of biodiversity. Habitat means what? Place of dwelling. We have different habitats like ecosystems, like the forest ecosystem, then we have the rainforest ecosystem, then we have the deciduous forest, mangroves, alpine meadows. All these are different types of habitats. So based on the geographical area. So that constitutes what? The ecosystem level or habitat level, or in general we call it as ecological diversity. So what is ecological diversity? Variety of ecosystems or habitats present in a geographical area is called ecological diversity. Diversity in the ecosystem level, like we come across the desert, the rainforest, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries, and even the alpine meadows. So this is all about the three levels of biodiversity. First level is called the genetic diversity or genetic level of diversity. Second one is called species level of diversity. And the third one is called ecological, or you can also call that as ecosystem level, or we can also call it as habit level of biodiversity. So what is species diversity? Variety of different species in a given area is called species diversity. And we can take an example, classical example of the one species of frog, which is varieties of species of frog is found in a particular area, like we can take the Western Ghats. Then ecological diversity, variety of ecosystems or habitats present in a geographical area is called ecological diversity. So diversity in the ecosystem level, like the desert or rainforest, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries, etc. forms the ecological diversity. Now moving on to how many species of plants and animals are there on Earth and how many in India. Now, what is the estimation of the biodiversity on this planet Earth as well as in our country, that is India? So now let us understand what is the amount of species diversity we come across in both in the planet Earth as a whole and in our country. Now, according to IUCN, what is IUCN? International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. So, according to IUCN, that is International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, which was established in 2004, 1.5 million of plants and animals are in our biosphere. This is an approximate estimation. More might be added on to this estimation or more may be deleted also from this estimation. But it is an approximate estimation that is given about the biodiversity species on this planet Earth. So we call it as what? Biosphere or planet Earth. So according to IUCN, in 2004, 1.5 million of plants and animals are in our biosphere. And one scientist by name Robert May places global species. Global means the whole species diversity that we find at the global level at about 7 million. This is a very important point to be noted, which is also asked in the examination. According to Robert May, what is the estimation of the global species diversity? They will ask. So it is around 7 million. So Robert May places global species diversity at about 7 million. Then in that particular level of the species, what we come across on this planet Earth, 70% of all species recorded are animals. That means we find more number of animals than the plants. The rest of them will be the plants. So more than 70% of all species recorded are animals, and all plants constitute about only 22% among animals, that 22%, and among animals that is insects constitute what? Insects constitute around 70%. So as we know, class Insecta of phylum Arthropoda, we know phylum Arthropoda is the first largest phylum of the animal kingdom, and class Insecta is the first largest class of the animal kingdom, because that means to say that the maximum number of organisms that we find on this planet Earth is insects. How is it possible for to find so many good number of insects on this planet Earth? Because of their adaptive features. So they have a better adaptive features to adapt to any type of habitats, and that is the reason the survival rate of these animals is more when compared to the other animals. So among the animals, so 70% of the species what is found on the planet Earth is animals, and the rest 22% is plants. Among the 70% of animals, all alone insects constitute what? 70%. Then imagine how enormous these insects are found on this planet Earth. So India has alone 2.4% of the world's land area. Its share of global species diversity is impressive, that is 8.1%. So we find more, as we know, the whole of the planet Earth is covered more by what? By it, only 2.4% of the world is land area, and the remaining is water. So here we find the global species diversity. What is our share then? So it has around how much? It is around 8.1%. India is considered as one of, as you know, among the 12 mega diversities, India is considered one among the mega diversity countries of the world. So that is the credit that goes to our country. So India is considered as one of the mega diversity countries of the world. As I already said, IUCN stands for what? International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. So according to IUCN, that is 1.5 million of plants and animals are in our biosphere. Robert May places what? Global species diversity at about 7 millions. So more than 70% of all species recorded are animals. All plants constitute about 22%, and among the animals, insects constitute 70%. India has only 2.4% of the world's land area. What is the share of India then? Its share of global species diversity is impressively how much? 8.1%. And India is considered one among the 12 mega diversity countries of the world. IUCN stands for International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. Now, let us understand the pattern of biodiversity, that is the latitudinal gradient. So, here you can see this is the picture of invertebrates, this is vertebrates, and this is about the plants. So, here you can imagine, so in the maximum number of animals are insects. Next comes which is the second largest phylum, molluscans. Soft-bodied animals or shelled animals constitute the second largest. And then next comes crustaceans. Then all the other animal species here. Here you can see fishes occupy the maximum biodiversity when it is compared to that is when it is compared to invertebrates. Next comes mammals. Next is birds. Next to fishes is birds. Next is reptiles. Next amphibians, and next mammals. So here you can see most of the 3/4 of the plants that are found on the planet are this gymnosperms. Next comes fungi. Next comes mosses, ferns, and other species of plant groups. So, pattern of biodiversity, latitudinal gradients. That is, species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the pole. I think we all know that as we move from the equator to the pole, the species diversity decreases because of the temperature variation. So, tropic area harbors more species than temperate and pole regions. Because tropical forests are more, they're more enormous in their biodiversity when compared to the other regions. So the largely tropical, I think all of us know Amazon rainforest is called the lungs of the planet, which is the world's biggest forest, right? Amazonian rainforest, forest in South America, has the greatest biodiversity on Earth. So it is the first largest forest in the world, and it is called as what? Lungs of the plant, because so many plant species and animal species you come across, particularly plant species, more the plants, more the oxygen. Hence, it is called the lungs of the planet. Then 40,000 species. So what is the composition of the biodiversity or the plant animal species we come across in this Amazonian forest? Then 40,000 species of plants, then 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 species of birds, 427 species of amphibians, 378 species of reptiles, and more than, we come across invertebrates. More than 125,000 invertebrates. So, what is the pattern of biodiversity, or what we call it as latitudinal gradients, which is also depicted in this beautiful picture. Pattern of biodiversity, that is species diversity, decreases as we move from the equator to the pole because of the variation in the temperature. The more cooler places, lesser will be the species diversity, and we know tropical region will have more species than the temperate region, and the largely tropical Amazonian rainforest, which is called the lungs of the planet, which is found in South America, has the greatest biodiversity on Earth, around 40,000 species of plants, then 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 species of birds, and 427 species of amphibians, 378 species of reptiles, more than 125,000 species of invertebrates. Moving on to why tropical rainforests are greater in biodiversity. Here you can see the beautiful picture of tropical forest, rainforest. See, if you see this beautiful picture only, we enjoy the beauty of nature. Who does not like to go to such places and enjoy the beauty of nature? So imagine if this beauty is not there, I think we would have been really very difficult to survive. So the enjoyment, the aesthetic value, what we get when we see this beautiful nature is something different, right? So why tropical rainforest has greater biodiversity than compared to the other regions? Unlike than compared to the temperate regions, unlike temperate regions subjected to frequent glaciations in the past, tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed. Very, very important is the tropical latitudes have remained undisturbed, not like the temperate regions which have been subjected to frequent glaciations, change in the climatic conditions, which may lead to various, what we call it as temperature ranges. So relatively undisturbed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. This is a key reason for why the tropical rainforest is rich in biodiversity when compared to the temperate region. Why? Because the tropical latitudes have remained undisturbed for many years without being disturbed, and that is also a reason that it is stable, and that has led to the evolution of different varieties of species, and that is due to, and that has led to species diversification. And tropical environments, unlike temperate ones, are less seasonal. So compared to temperate, the tropical environment is less seasonal, relatively more constant and predictable, promotes niche specialization and lead to greater species diversity. So this is also one reason why the tropical rainforests are more in biodiversity. That is, tropical environment, unlike the temperate environment, is less seasonal and relatively more constant. More the constant the environment, more will be the species diversity. More the changes in the the season, or maybe even in the, if it is the ecosystem is not constant, then obviously there is variation in the species diversity. Then there is more solar energy because it is very rich in forests available in the tropics, which contribute to higher productivity. Why there is more number of trees and plants found in this tropical rainforest when compared? Because there is more solar energy, and we know that solar energy is one very important raw material for the plants to manufacture food, and obviously the more number of plants means it is more productivity. Then what is ecological niche? The conditions which in which a type of living organism can live successfully is called as an ecological niche. The conditions in which a type of living organism can live successfully. And that is also one reason for species diversity in a particular geographical area. So why tropical rainforest has greater biodiversity? Unlike temperate regions subjected to frequent glaciations in the past, tropical latitudes have remained undisturbed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. And even the tropical environments, unlike the temperate ones, are less seasonal and relatively more constant and predictable, promotes niche specialization and lead to greater species diversity. So there is more solar energy available in the tropics, which contributes to higher productivity. What is ecological? This is one term which is asked in the examination. What is ecological niche? The conditions in which a type of living organism can live successfully. Hope you have understood the first very concepts of this interesting chapter called biodiversity and conservation. So I'll be back in the coming session with some more interesting concepts like the species area relationship in the coming session. So till then, goodbye and thank you.